We're preparing for Facebook Live. Vivek ready हो?
Yes, sir.
ल म एकछिन फेसबुक लाइभ गरिहालेँ।
Because guest stars, are not camera shots. They can pull on the and themselves being pampered. Their favorite place? Well, backstage corner. Guest stars keep things private. A transfer? Sure. Anytime.
Vivek, we can start now.
Okay, sir. Do you want me to start? Or do we wait for Professor to
Yeah,
see?
I think we can
Pramod,
start. Yes, sir.
from
Yes, sir.
Pramod, Professor Siri will join in about 10 minutes.
Okay,
So I
sure.
think
So we
we
can
will
start.
bring him in. Yeah.
Okay. Vivek, just a second. Yeah. Let's start now, Vivek.
Okay, so we'll start now. Namaste, good evening, and good afternoon, everyone, from wherever you're watching us. So I'll be your moderator for the session. I'm Vivek Dosthapa. I'm program coordinator and research associate here at NICE. I would like to welcome you all to a very special and timely session on the webinar titled Shockwaves from West Asia and Assessing the Iran War's Impact on South Asia. As you are all aware, the conflict in West Asia is starting to take a toll on the entire world, and the conflict has made the Strait of Hormuz inaccessible, and major energy infrastructures of the world are damaged. And this has pushed the entire world to the brink of an energy crisis. We have already started feeling the shockwaves in South Asia as restaurants are closing down, schools and governments have declared holiday to save fuel, and there is already shortage of fuel even for day-to-day commute. And in light of all these events, without taking any more time, I would like to jump to the discussions. I would like to start by introducing the first speaker for today. We'll start with Ambassador Anil Trinugayat. Trigunayat is a visiting fellow at NICE. He specializes on international relations and diplomacy. In the Ministry of External Affairs, he has worked in the Economic, West Asia, and North Africa and Consulate divisions. He has also served as the Director General or Joint Secretary for the Gulf and Hajj divisions in the MEA, New Delhi. Thereafter, he worked as Deputy Chief of Mission in the rank of Ambassador in the Embassy of India, Moscow. Uh, Prior to his superannuation in May 2016, he served as Ambassador of India to Jordan and Libya and High Commissioner to Malta from June 2012 to May 2016. He is a postgraduate in physics from the Agra Kumaon University and also studied Russian history, culture, and language at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. So, Ambassador, I hand over the floor to
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, Vivek, and thank you, Dr. Jaswal, for inviting me for once again at this very important and timely and unfortunate topic on which we are going to discuss. As you are all aware that before 1979, Israel, Iran, and Saudi Arabia all were on the American side or in the American camp in the Cold War 1.0. And since 1979, after the Islamic regime of Ayatollahs came into power, we have witnessed that the MAD syndrome has prevailed, the mutually assured destruction syndrome between Israel and Iran. Until very recently, United States managed always to contain this direct conflict. There have been covert operations on both sides, whether to kill the Iranian uh, nuclear scientists, strategic persons, and the both of them have continued with that. But all said and done, despite the height of the problems that they had between themselves or among themselves, because earlier it was Saudi Arabia and the Iranians, because of the Shia Sunni divide and because of the geopolitical influence in the region, they were also going into this uh, competition, which was quite bad for many, many years. But then, with the help of the Iraqis, Omanis, and Chinese, finally the the Saudi Arabia and Iran decided to patch up their differences. And since then, they have been working rather closely, even during the recent Israel Gaza war. But at the same time, the Israelis have not been happy about it. They always thought that since Iran had developed this asymmetric kind of advantage in the region by having the 4H, as they are called, that is Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah, and Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq. Now, those are the ones which give Iran an added advantage, and they are on the borders of Israel, as you know, Hamas and Hezbollah. And Houthis in the Red Sea and Yemen have already shown that they can even bring down the Americans. Last May, you have seen the Americans bought their peace. First, they to finish them off and finally realized they can't do much. So they made some agreement in last April, May with the Houthis. In this war, while Hezbollah has directly come and fighting Israelis at the moment, and Israel is doing the invasion, they have their own game plan in Lebanon. But Hamas has already been decimated in the last 2 years of war, 2.5 years of war with Israel. But Houthis have been rather quiet until recently, until yesterday, I must say. It is because, in my view, Iran has been keeping them in reserve. And so far, unfortunately, whenever the negotiations have taken place between Iran and United States on the nuclear agreement, every time they are nearing some kind of a conclusion, immediately we see that a war takes place because Israel does not want this agreement to happen. It does not want the Islamic regime or a permanent threat to continue. And therefore, in June, you have seen last time the 12 days war last year. And this time also, when two rounds have taken place, they were almost near the agreement. And if you want to see an anguished foreign minister of Oman, who has been issuing small statements, has written in Economist, and I think you must read it fully, what he is saying about everything. But Iran has all along has been saying since the last 8 months that if it is attacked, it will attack on every single US or Israeli asset in the region. And that means the United States, which has about 19 bases in the region, all are fair game. Their companies are the fair game. Same thing applies to Israel. Now, that brings a newer dimension in this. While last time there was a managed conflict because Americans came, bombed three places, but they allowed, in a way, the Iranians to attack at one of their base. But this time, what we are looking at is that Iran is consistently bombarding the bases as well as other installations, civilian infrastructure in the region, which is causing a very major problem. One is that the Americans are unable to protect or provide the security cover that they had promised to these Gulf countries, selling them hundreds of billions worth of arms and others. Secondly, they have realized that against Iran and Israel, they really do not have any chance of survival. Therefore, possibility is that all these countries will eventually will try to come. The American calculation, I mean, you all know that this was a war without a plan, without a strategy, and without a clear understanding of either the terrain or the resilience of the Shia people. So just by killing one leader or 10 leaders or 10 military commanders has not worked because they have adopted these new strategies called mosaic defense strategy, which is IRGC, which is their main fighting force, has gone around the country with about 31 groups, and they're autonomous now. They only know the targets. So irrespective of whether there is a war or not, they are continuing to hit every target that they were given in advance. So it's a regime survival versus regime change strategy, and the war that is going. To Americans who were until recently very clueless and were probably driven into this war by Israel, as Netanyahu himself has said, this was a war of choice, avoidable war totally. But they went into it, and now it is becoming a war of compulsion. So, until and unless President Trump suddenly decides and finds that he needs to quit, it's too much now, he has achieved his war objectives, I don't see a very quick end to the war. Now, this is something that the whole world has really feared all these times because the large supplies, more than half of the global supplies, come from this region. The sea lanes of communications are extremely important. There are, whether it is Strait of Hormuz, Bab el Mandab, or for that matter, the Suez Canal. So all these can be stopped, can be contained, and which will immediately have a great impact. We have seen what Houthis had done last time. And so now today, even the Strait of Hormuz is partially closed. Partially, why I'm saying is that it is closed for ships, American as well as Israelis. But the others are being allowed on case to case basis. India has also got about 4 or 5 ships. Through that, we had 22 of them tankers lying there. 18 of them are gradually coming in. But it is on one-to-one discussion. But it is having a tremendous impact on the global economy. All markets, you know that those who are following the markets in every country, the indexes have gone down tremendously. If you see that in all our homes, there is a stress about the supply disruptions, and it is taking time. Cost is increasing, and India so far is trying to buy oil and trying to manage it through diplomacy and dialogue. Not only oil, but trying to come up with some solution so that there can be a quick end to this war. Prime Minister Modi has spoken to both Dr. Pezeshkian and Prime Minister Netanyahu. Dr. Jaishankar has spoken 4 or 5 times to his counterpart. But the decapitation strategy which is taking place, I don't know, soon we don't know whom to talk to, frankly. And that will be the worst case scenario because that means the Americans have always destroyed. They cannot win a war, but they can always destroy the place. And that's precisely is happening. India has been trying to help the neighboring countries whom we have been supplying all along, whether it is Nepal, whether it is Sri Lanka or Bangladesh. So whatever is possible for us, we are trying to do that. But the situation is really extremely, I must say, dire and very, very difficult for the people. And it is going to get worse in case, as it is being reported now, that if the Saudis or Qataris or Emiratis also join the war on the side of the Americans, then we will see far more destruction taking place because they are all in the firing range, and then their civilian infrastructure will also come into Iranian fire. Now, there are estimates about Iran's capability are still not there. If you today, one more thing we all have to be very careful about is the gray zone warfare, which means that the disinformation campaigns that is taking place from all sides, so you can't really get to the truth. But the fact remains is that for a $3,000 Shahed drone, you are having $1 million missile, which is being used to intercept it. The US and Israel both are falling short of their interceptors, and the statistics inform that the situation on their side is also very bad. So I think if a war stops is number one, if President Trump decides that enough is enough, because he's also having a lot of domestic problems against this war, because it's an unauthorized war. So according to the Congress, it is illegal. If you were watching yesterday, the inquiry in the Intelligence Committee of the of Senate and Congress, the Tulsi Gabbard, who is the director, national intelligence, and others, could not answer a single question consistently. They were all passing the buck. So it looks like that they are in this epic fury is going to be a fury within the United States as well. And the Lion's Roar, as well as Operation Promise, all are going to be suboptimal as far as the outcome of this war is concerned. I am only afraid that in case the Iran becomes completely destabilized, and there is a civil war kind of a situation takes place. More radicalization will happen, more terrorism will happen. So only sensible thing today is to resort to the dialogue. Iran has given three conditions, and those can be negotiated. I'm quite sure they know it. And but if the leaders, I mean Ali Larzani, the Security Council leader, he was the head of the Security Council, was the right guy. But each of the one who has been really eliminated has been replaced by a more radical person. Now, Jilani, who's come, is a more radical person. Same way, Mustafa, who's currently the supreme leader, is more radical than his father. His father had prevented and, in fact, had issued a fatwa against the nuclear weapons. So, the problem is when you manufacture, like they did in Iraq, the cause for something for does not exist, then it is extremely difficult for any country to continue to do so. So, Iran's mosaic strategy, the as they call it, scorched earth strategies, means hitting everywhere in the region, is going to play out once again in a much more vigorous manner, if the war continues beyond 2 3 days more. So I'll stop here, and I'll then take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think I would like to move on to our next speaker. I will start by introducing Mr. Asanga Abaya Gunasakera. Asanga is an author, international security and geopolitics analyst, and strategic advisor from Sri Lanka. He is a visiting fellow at NICE. He is a senior fellow and the executive director of the South Asia Foresight Network at the Millennium Project in Washington, D.C. Asanga is also a technical advisor to the International Monetary Fund in Washington, D.C., where he contributed to Sri Lanka's IMF Governance Diagnostic Report 2023. He has led two government think tanks providing strategic advocacy on foreign policy and security in Sri Lanka. He was the founding Director General of the National Security Think Tank under the Ministry of Defense, INSSSL, until January 2020. Before this, he has served as the Executive Director at the Foreign Policy Think Tank Kadir Gamar Institute. Asanga is authored through several books, which include Teardrop Diplomacy, Conundrum of an Island, Sri Lanka at Crossroads Towards a Better World Order. I think a new book has also just been released, Winds of Change, Geopolitics at the Crossroads of South and Southeast Asia. He's a keen commentator on geopolitics, international relations, with a special focus on China and Sri Lanka, South Asian security challenges, South Asian politics, and preserving democratic values. So, sir, I hand over the floor to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Pramod, for inviting me and having this timely discussion. My fellow panelist, Ambassador Anil Lucas from Thailand, and yes, Professor Siri will also join from Sri Lanka. So thank you. And I will have few points that I would like to sort of highlight, actually about 5 points about what's going on in the present context. So a few hours ago, I was fortunate to meet the Sri Lankan Foreign Minister, where I actually presented my book, Winds of Change, basically highlights the dramatic shift which is going on in the geopolitical context, seeing the risk bit earlier and identifying it. What the ambassador mentioned on the mosaic strategy, I can clearly highlight basically what Iran is basically using a horizontal strategy, which means many geographies are now part of the war. South Asia, as well as Europe or many other geographies, are now feeling the pressure from the energy crisis, which they have created. The escalation, the horizontal escalation, has moved into step by step in the escalation ladder. And right now, what you see is escalation trap. What I call escalation trap is that when the tactical strategy of United States was a quick attack and sort of, a regime change was the strategy, has moved into kind of a prolonged 3 weeks now, and I would say much longer. What the ambassador mentioned was a very important point, the civil war. Is there any possibility within? Because Iran is a large geography, larger than Iraq, and a larger population. Possibility of civil war as well as US troops or US engagement on the ground, whether that would be a possibility, is something that we need to sort of look at it very seriously now. So if that is the case, we are looking at a longer war, I would say, region, which especially countries like Sri Lanka. We have gone through a lot, the economic crisis, Nepal, Pramod, as well as the others from, as well as Bangladesh. So we are on sort of moving in a very fragile, I would say, an economic condition right now. We don't have stockpiles, oil stockpiles. We don't have reserves. So we are looking at total economy sort of collapsing. The alternatives have been looked at immediately. And again, you'll see the geopolitical dimensions of these alternatives, such as the oil from Russia or wherever. So you see discussions going on right now in the geopolitical context that is the world strengthening Putin, or is Putin getting stronger because he's getting more revenue from the oil money? So that discussion is already there. So Sri Lanka, if you look at it, we have three areas to which I want to highlight. Basically, first is the energy crisis. Now, right now, we have schools have been closed for one day now. On Wednesdays, they are given. There's no schools. Bangladesh also same, I believe Nepal. So the energy crisis will hit the import-dependent economies like Sri Lanka and many others in a significant way. In terms of the supply chains as well as the production cost. This is very, I think, the concern of the social issues. Professor Siri, I think Siri Hettige will discuss this. He's a sociologist. I believe he will be able to discuss the impact to the ground level. So that's something that I'm looking forward to hear from him. The second point I want to mention is on the maritime security wise, Sri Lanka as an island nation in a geostrategic location. So we are facing already threats for in our EEZ, for example, the last incident which happened, the Iris Dina, the attack of the Iran ship which was torpedoed. So you could see that Sri Lanka as a signatory for the law of the sea, and it happened in our EEZ. So there is basically the article clearly mentions that the coastal state should know some sort of have some sort of information about what's going on in its waters, as well as I mean, if you look at the larger the security context of India. India's strategic space or Indian Ocean as a net security provider, the role of India. So these are all will be concerns in the next, I would say, couple of days or weeks, because the heightened security concern in the Indian Ocean has affected basically the policymakers as well as in New Delhi, Colombo, and it would sort of heighten to, I would say, to a certain degree that it would be sort of, I mean, both nations as well as the other nations in the Indian Ocean needs to sort of find a way to get together and discuss these issues. So one important point I want to mention on the maritime security. Now, if you look at a few days ago, the 31st Fleet from Okinawa was moved to the Indian Ocean. That's 2,000 Marines. So as signatories of logistic agreements, Sri Lanka is a signatory on the AXA agreement. India also have signed with the US. So these are also concerns to kind of look at whether we are providing logistic supplies for the military, which we are bound by these agreements. So these are also areas that needs to be looked at before we get into those troubled waters. And the third point is the balanced, how we
I think we've lost you, sir. Pramod sir, can you get in touch with
Yeah,
Asang sir?
let's wait for a few seconds. If not, we'll move to the next speaker. I think he has network issue. Yeah, he's back. Please unmute yourself.
There's a power outage here.
Oh, okay.
Yes, there's a
Um,
power outage. Can you hear me?
Yes,
is
sir.
coming back, no?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
You can
Um,
hear me. Okay. My apologies for that. There's a power outage. Yeah. So I think those are the points that I want to mention. The final point was about achieving the balance of foreign policy. Okay, we got the power back, so
yeah,
I think
yeah.
we would have to face this in the coming weeks, I would believe. The final point was about balanced foreign policy. How do we sort of achieve this in terms of the geopolitical complexity, the security dimensions, as well as the maritime security, as well as all those areas. So how do we sort of achieve that? And it is very clear from what's happening. We are on a escalation trap, and that's very clear. And the escalation trap is that the United States, I believe, they have managed. The Iran has managed to create a strategic wedge between the Gulf states as well as so basically you could see the strategic wedge between the Gulf states and the US. So where they attack the Gulf states, but then Gulf states would ask that why are we dragged into this war? So I think it's very clear what's going on, and countries like Sri Lanka would need to sort of navigate these concerns. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I would like to move on to our third speaker for today. Next, we have Professor Siri Hittis. Professor Siri is a distinguished Sri Lankan sociologist and Professor Emeritus at the University of Colombo, widely recognized for his contributions to the study of social change, development, and youth in South Asia. With an academic career spanning several decades, he has played a pivotal role in shaping sociological research and discourse both within in Sri Lanka and internationally. He has completed his BA honors in 1973 and bachelor's in philosophy and sociology in 1974 from the University of Colombo. He graduated with first class honors. He later pursued his PhD at Monash University, Australia, which he completed in 1980 under the prestigious Monash Graduate Scholarship. His academic excellence and research potential were further recognized when he was awarded with the Fulbright Senior Scholar Fellowship in 1994 to 1995 at the University of Pennsylvania in the United States. So, Professor, I would like to hand over the floor to you.
Yeah, thank you much for inviting me, and I can actually start from where my friend Asanga left. I think I can now look at the whole issue from within the country rather than without, because everything else outside, I mean, it's um, yeah. What I want to say is that I'm not going to touch on the war and the crisis. That's all well known. But I would look at it from within Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka actually is a very vulnerable country given the present situation that we have in terms of politics, in terms of economy, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of social conditions, and so on and so forth. So I would touch on a few of these things, within limited time that I have. I think the most important thing here is that in Sri Lanka, we have always the risk of political instability because sectarian politics dominate in spite of major crises that we have encountered over the last several years. So I don't want to say anything more, and I think the present situation is the same. Sectarian form. So in other words, to build political consensus across these divisions is a big challenge, and I think we witness it on a day-to-day basis. So I don't want to really labor that point very much, but I would like to now look at the whole, you know, issue of the economy, because the Sri Lankan economy is very vulnerable because we are very much dependent on let's say, imports. I mean, say for instance, we were fairly industrialized, in the first 3 decades after independence, but our industries basically went away, collapsed one by one due to, the policies that were adopted at that time. And as a result, we are, almost totally dependent on imports of industrial goods. And of course, today we know that we have certain things that we certainly have to import in terms of modern technological, stuff. And then even in terms of, let's say basic things like, food, transport and medicine, I think again, we are not really independent because we are also very much dependent. So we certainly have serious issues with respect to, what our people need on a day-to-day basis. I think the most important thing is, of course, the mobility and energy. I think the point is that since our transportation system is very much private, rather than public, and that was not the case in the past, but of course it has come to that, in the last few decades, and therefore our roads are very much used by private modes of transportation, and public transport is really marginal. And of course, you can imagine with the energy crisis, I mean the world crisis that we have, we are going to have serious issues. And then of course, energy, I don't have to tell you, also not very much dependent on renewable sources like hydro and so on, and therefore we certainly have to rely a great deal on imported diesel and so on and so forth, gas and so on and so forth. And then of course the other dimension of course is our exchange situation, because since we do not have too many sources of foreign exchange coming to the country, we are very, very vulnerable because we have been dependent on Middle East migrants. I mean, and not only Middle East, of course, East Asians as well. Migrant labor actually is the biggest source of foreign exchange for Sri Lanka, amounting to about $7.5 billion US. Now, of course, I don't have to tell you about the vulnerability there, and then of course we also have you also have other issues connected with the families left behind, and they are naturally dependent on them, and of course that can really create a lot of uncertainty and unrest among families who are left behind, and so on and so forth. And then the situation with respect to poverty and vulnerability, I think we have serious situation because the structure of our employment shows very clearly that only about 27% of the people who are working have regular employment with social protection, and we have about 65% of the people who are working. They are very much dependent on day-to-day incomes, as informal sector activists, doing all kinds of things. So this is the kind of I mean, I don't want to go too much into it, but I think what I said probably indicate to you that we are really sort of vulnerable in this present situation, and any prolongation of this conflict can create a lot of issues. I'm really thinking about social and political instability, because when people really get affected, and when they find it difficult to really manage, and we know when children cannot move around, for their education and so on and so forth, there will be a lot of resentment, unrest, if you like. And then given the present political situation in the country, where we still do not have political culture, that really, emphasizes, the need to find common ground in a crisis situation. And that is not what we are observing right now. So what I feel is that our vulnerability is not just from without, but also from within. So I don't want to say anything more, but I think we really have to do a great deal to cope with the situation that has arisen in the country, as a result of this major uh, conflict that is happening in the Middle East, and prolongation of this conflict can certainly be really very serious for Sri Lanka. I didn't want to be, too pessimistic, but on the other hand, I cannot really, not look at, the information that we have, the data we have, and I think we certainly have to, figure out how we could, really, move forward given the present kind of circumstances. Right. Okay. So thank you very much. And I don't know whether I took too much time. No.
Thank you, Professor. It's all right. So I think I would like to break the sequence for now because I think Ambassador Anil Trigunayat is on a time crunch as much as we would love to have him here and listen to his insights. So I would like to do a short Q&A session with Ambassador Trigunayat. So, sir, we've received some questions for you.
Yes,
First, Ankita Jha from NICE wants to ask, how does the West Asia war influence the Muslim minority politics of India and the energy diplomacy with the Gulf states? And I would also like to add two more questions with this. So, given the emerging multipolar alignment involving Russia, China, and Iran, how should India navigate its strategic autonomy without diluting its Indo-Pacific commitments? And then we have Vidushi Sharma from NICE who wants to ask, do these developments present an opportunity for India to assume a more proactive diplomatic role in conflict de-escalation, and what form might such engagement take?
thank you. Very, very good questions, I must say. In the first place, as you know, in India, we have about 10% shares and more than 200 million Muslims. We are the third largest Muslim nation in the world. So obviously, they are very much concerned about whatever is happening there. We have seen that with the assassination of Ayatollah Khamenei, there have been a lot of protests in India in different parts. So obviously, that is very much there. So this is something I believe that will continue to will play from both sides. They are also looking at the Indian Muslim population as their, in a way, of some interest to most of the countries in the region. We have had problems also from the region in certain times because many of them or their charities, so-called charities, have been supporting some groups which has been undesirable from the intelligence side, especially moving for radicalization and all that. So we hope that we do not have another ISIS or any other organization going forward. And that is what I mentioned, that if that happens in Iran, that would be a worst case scenario, in fact, and for the whole of the region, and not only for, and it will be a very big problem for the Americans to even handle. They couldn't even handle the last one. ISIS is already in the move. So we'll have to be very careful about this going forward, how it plays out. Iran already has four groups, as I mentioned, maybe more, which have been supporting the regime and which very often want to stand up for saving the regime. So they will also be very active. So this is how we are going to see, and then you will see people might be interested in going and supporting them. And those of you who know about the Shia Islam, you know that especially doing such a thing during the period of Ramadan uh, is like uh, they are sort of ready for the martyrdom during this period, and that's how it is considered a sacrifice, which I think the Americans or the Western countries don't have a clue about. They don't understand the resilience of the people. So we hope that it will not spill over to that extent. So that is about the minority issue. As far as strategic autonomy is concerned, I think that has become the real uh, option for almost all countries in the world today. You are looking at it. Prime Minister Modi has spoken to Netanyahu. He spoke to Dr. Pezeshkian. Today only he spoke to three or four leaders, including Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Oman, Kuwait. All the leaders he has been talking to, including Malaysia and Indonesia. So apart from the Russians and others, we are continuing to talk to each one of them. And because ending this war is a priority for everyone. Now, various solutions have been proffered by them, many countries, how to go about doing it. But at the end of the day, how do you prevail upon United States in the first place? And United States must prevail upon Israel, because Israel is one country which will not listen to anyone. They may listen to India, no doubt, but they will not take action according to our desire. That is very much there because they consider, as I mentioned, Iran to be an existential threat for them, like the Iranians consider Israelis as an existential threat. So, strategic autonomy today is the preferred option for foreign policy. Why I'm saying so is you saw all the European countries, which are part of the NATO. President Trump wanted them to come and work upon it in the Strait of Hormuz. None of them has come or agreed to that. Number one, the war objectives have not been clear. And number two is what is the strategy going forward? And so therefore, when you the people who are part of an alliance, and India never likes the alliance system. The word itself is not very much used except in the international and multilateral fora. So therefore, I don't think, and I see that India is very much proactively involved today. Nearly every day we are talking to everyone, every leader, and trying to convey the messages on all sides. And Iranians also, we have provided them the humanitarian assistance as they desired, and anything else that they require, we are happy to provide to alleviate the suffering of the people. And that's what India is doing currently. At the same time, we are very much against the attacks on energy or the infrastructure in the Gulf countries. That is something that has really exacerbated the situation beyond redemption at the moment. What we are looking at is that some rapprochement that was happening in the region will not happen anymore because then the Gulf countries themselves, especially the Shia-Sunni divide, you will see once again becoming accentuated, and we will have more problems in that. Hopefully, sense will prevail on all sides. So I would say that today India, because why India is also taking this proactive diplomacy. Number one is I always say the region, the security and stability in West Asia is of existential importance to India also. We import about 50 to 60% of our oil from there. We import about 40 to 50% gas from there, and there are long-term contracts from these places. Fertilizer, which comes from there, which is very important for the food security. It's not only energy security. Then you have the three lanes of communications. 85% of our trade goes through this. So it's extremely important. That's why we have deployed the Indian Navy to escort the ships. So they're already there in the region. And as the earlier professor was mentioning, the what happened was the naval ship, the which had come for exercises in Indian waters. This is something that was that caused a complication for the countries as well, for India and Sri Lanka both. But we have helped take the bodies back. Then two of the other ships which were there participating have been provided. They have anchored in the Indian coast of Kochi, in the Indian port of Kochi. So I think that we are doing what we can at the moment, but situation is very volatile and very, very dynamic because both sides are not talking and they both have these vertically opposite, I should say, the positions at the moment. So I think that President Trump is understanding the folly of it all. He will not admit that. Let him admit the victory. But then what do the Iranians get? Iranians want that this should not become like Lebanon syndrome. That once again, whenever you feel like you come and attack, and so they are looking for these kind of security guarantees from everybody. They have also following the legal, I should say, route to claim more compensation for the damages that have been done from the United States and others in that sense. So far, the Europeans are also keeping quiet. They have not bought into President Trump's narratives, and many of them are against Israeli approach, what is happening in Gaza and West Bank and Lebanon. So all these put together, now there's so many flames are there. Let's hope they don't become into a very incendiary fire which will burn everything down.
Thank you, Ambassador. Now I would like to go back to the sequence of the webinar, but before I do that, I would like to request all our viewers and participants to drop any questions that you might have for any of our speakers, and we will come back to you in the question answer session. Now I would like to move on to Lucas Meyer. I would like to start by introducing Lucas first. Lucas Meyer is a researcher, analyst, and mediator currently serving at the as the senior program officer at the German Southeast Asian Center of Excellence, CPZ. It's an academic institute and think tank headquartered at the Faculty of Law at Thammasat University in Bangkok. In this role, Lucas acts as the deputy editor-in-chief and South Asia regional editor for CPZ's Asia in Review. He is also a visiting fellow at NICE and as a mediator qualified under the German law and by the International Mediation Institute. Lucas serves as the deputy head of CPZ's Mediation Center. Additionally, Lucas is an active member of the Human Rights and ESG working groups at the German Institute for Compliance, which unites Germany's leading compliance practitioners and scholars. Lucas has an interdisciplinary academic background in cultural studies, intercultural communication, and political science. He holds an MA in cultural studies from Goldsmiths College, University of London, and a BA in cultural studies, political science from Leuphana University, Lüneburg, Germany. So, Lucas, I would like to hand over the floor to you.
Thank you very much. And thank you first and foremost, of course, to Dr. Pramod and Asanga for putting this panel together. Thank you very much. I would also like to center my initial remarks on the situation here in Thailand and to give an initial assessment on the energy situation. Of course, Thailand is a net energy importer. Interestingly, crude oil accounts for approximately 2/3 of the energy imports, and that has shifted in recent years even more towards the Middle East. So approximately 58% as of 2025 is sourced from the Middle East, which is almost up to more than 10% where it was in 2023. On the LNG side, so looking at the gas side, Thailand imports more than 75% approximately from the Middle East, and the rest is sourced from neighboring Myanmar. The current situation, if we are looking at the supply coverage, that was revised actually. So in the early stage of the current crisis, that was rendered at around 61 days. The government officially gives now numbers at around 95 days, some of which, however, is in transit. So there is a certain uncertainty in that. Notably, a Thai vessel is still in the Strait of Hormuz. So there was a Thai vessel that was being attacked. And because of that, Thai authorities are now in constant engagement with Iran, hoping that the vessel can be secured. And additionally, the Thai foreign minister just very recently engaged with the Tehran's envoy here, anyway, more generally requesting that Thai commercial vessels are being provided safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. I think what's more important anyway are the knock-on effects from which we are beginning to see early signs at this stage. A couple points there. So we are, of course, seeing fuel prices and logistics costs being on the rise, and they are feeding into the supply chains. So manufacturers and distributors are already predicting that we are beginning to see in April in particular knock-on effects for consumers, suggesting that then inflation will be passed through so weak, which is unfortunate because April is also the time where we have the most important holiday season here in Thailand. So that is normally when people travel. On the demand side, despite the government assurance, we are seeing that consumption has actually risen quite notably. So behavior of the people is now really focused on short-term consumption, stockpiling, etc., really very much ignoring assurances on from the government side. Another notable spillover is on the tourism side. Of course, Thailand is a popular tourism destination, and the situation, the war in the Middle East has so far led to 1,000 inbound flights being cancelled. That sounds significant, but currently accounts only for 3% of total inbound traffic. However, worst case scenarios for the tourism sector assume that this can get much, much worse, and potential damages can go into billions of US dollar. Additionally, Thailand has a notable workforce in the Middle East. Around 60, 70,000 people are there. So far, only very few people, around 1,000 people, have requested to return from the region to Thailand, however. I think what is interesting, because it resonates in a way with South Asian countries that are represented on the panel, especially, I believe, Sri Lanka, is the situation the government is operating under, because until actually we are still under an interim government. So Thailand had an election, but just yesterday, the prime minister, who had previously also served as prime minister, has been confirmed by a parliamentary majority, but officially the government is not in place. So that severely also limits the room for the government to respond. To just give you one indication, there's a government mechanism called the Oil Fuel Fund, and through that funding, the government can subsidize the fuel prices in the country. Every day, that currently costs the government around 28 million US dollar just to subsidize the price for fuel. So up until earlier this week, that had already accumulated around 290 million US dollar in costs. To further extend that funding, an actual government would have to be in place, and that will take a couple of weeks more, so until late March, early April, due to constitutional constraints, actually, to increase the statutory loss ceiling of that oil fund. That also then includes additional measures that have been discussed, for example, excise tax reductions, etc. All of these can only be decided upon once an actual government is in place. So, of course, the government is trying to diversify. In the meantime, it is in touch with Russia, Brazil, some African countries, the United States, etc., just to get down the dependency on Middle Eastern supply. On a side note, Thailand has an export ban in place, but it keeps exporting to two neighboring countries, namely Myanmar and Laos. Laos being fully dependent on Thailand's supplies for the fact that it's landlocked. Lastly, I want to give an outlook because, and again, that I believe resonates with some South Asian countries. The situation against which these developments are unfolding here in Thailand is that of a government that came in or won the election, is now coming in on strong economic footing. So besides a strong security messaging, the government that is coming in under Prime Minister Anutin focused in particular on delivering on the economic front. Notably because Thailand, in a regional comparison, is somewhat struggling, in particular to its peer competitors like Vietnam. So now having the situation, which is only beginning to unfolding, is most certainly not ideal. couple of indicators for that. So Thailand has a notable public household debt, excuse me, already. Official numbers go up to 90%, but unofficial numbers go way beyond the 100% mark if you include the informal lending practices. On the fiscal side, that is already constrained already. Public debt is at around 65% of the GDP. But there is again a ceiling in place at 70%. So that in turn also limits the policy flexibility in that regard. And so we have to see how that is really unfolding here in Thailand. There are early signs which are beginning to show, but I think from a perspective on the ground, so to speak, we will only really see manifesting in the next couple of weeks into the month of April. And I think I leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucas. Now we will, last but not least, we would like to move on to Dr. Pramod Jaiswal. I would like to start by introducing him. So, Dr. Jaiswal is the research director at NICE. He has been a regular and visiting faculty at different universities of Nepal, Bangladesh, China, and Thailand. He is visiting fellow at the Sandia National Laboratories Cooperative Monitoring Center, Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is in the US, and senior fellow at the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies, New Delhi, non-resident fellow at the India Studies Center, Ubon Ratchathani University, Thailand, and Senior Research Fellow at the Institute for National and International Security, Belgrade. He's also an alumnus of the Near East South Asia Center, National Defense University, Washington, D.C. Previously, he was a researcher at South Asian Studies Institute of Asian Studies, Chulalongkorn University, Bangkok, and Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis at New Delhi. He holds Masters, MPhil, and PhD from the School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi. So, sir, I leave the floor to you.
Thank you, Vivek. The advantage of being the last speaker is we don't have to go into much details, as much has already been said. Since there was already detailed discussion regarding the situation in West Asia, I'll focus on South Asia, impact on South Asia in general and Nepal in particular. We all know that the ongoing conflict between Israel, Iran, and United States has escalated into a regional war with global spillover implications, and there are attacks on energy infrastructure, disruptions of Gulf security, and risk to maritime routes like the Strait of Hormuz. Uh, this conflict is not geographically limited. Its effects are deeply felt into energy dependent and remittance dependent regions like South Asia. So let me focus on the impact of South Asia. I think the first most important is energy security shock that the region has got. South Asia is heavily dependent on Middle East oil, and the attack on gas fields and shipping routes has pushed oil and LPG prices sharply upward. There's rising inflation, fiscal deficits, and subsidy burdens are there. Almost all the countries of South Asia are heavily affected. We can see a huge impact on India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. I think Nepal will face it very soon. I think other sector inflation and economic instability will be one that we foresee. There are rising fuel prices because of rise in the price of transport sector, which has added to the price of fuel. And the food price has gone high, and manufacturing cost will obviously increase. So, developing economies of South Asia are hit hardest due to the situation. And I think the likely outcomes will be currency depreciations, which we have seen recently. Today, I saw Indian rupees going to 90 per dollar. So the currency depreciation will be there, higher interest rate and slower growth will be witnessed. I think the major will be also remittance disruptions. Millions of South Asian workers are there in Gulf, many are from Nepal as well, and this conflict is going to have job losses, evacuations. All the countries are prepared for that, and there will be reduced remittance inflow because when the worker will return back, obviously it will impact the remittance. And the major countries that will be heavily impacted by this will be Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, and Sri Lanka, and Nepal and Sri Lanka. India might be comparatively less. When you talk about strategic and diplomatic pressure, we see that countries are facing huge pressure. How to balance itself? Countries has to balance relations. For example, India find itself in a very difficult positions between Israel and Iran because it enjoys good relations with both. Pakistan and Bangladesh have taken pro-Iranian stance. I think Nepal is also in a very situation where it has not spoken much, but it enjoys very good relations with US and Israel. So they will have a very difficult time in balancing the geopolitical pressure. Uh, Trade and connectivity disruptions we have witnessed, airspace closure and maritime insecurity has disrupted, which has affected trade routes, tourism and supply chains, and insurances and shipping costs might rise significantly. Let me now focus on Nepal, which is very important for us. I think first is remittance crisis because we know there are almost 1.6 to 1.7 million Nepali workers work in Gulf, the one sector where huge amount of Nepalese are there, and they contribute to almost 30% of uh, GDP comes from remittance sector. So it is one of the highest globally. So I think that will be a major attack on Nepal. There will be job losses in Gulf economies. There will be return of migrant workers and reduce inflow of foreign currencies. So that will hit Nepal's economy badly. And that will cause inflation and cost of living. Of course, Nepal imports huge amount of fuel from India, which again India gets from other countries in West Asia. So there will be higher transport cost, like we have just discussed. Expensive food and essentials will be there. Pressure on foreign exchange reserve will be witnessed very soon. Uh, Nepal also has huge number of labor, so that's why labor mobility and aviation disruptions might be witnessed. Flight to Gulf countries are suspended and restricted. They're trying to revive, but still it's taking time. And there's a decline in foreign employment opportunities. We can see massive decline in Nepali youth going to that region for work. Migration and youth unemployment might increase because of all this situation. Even on the security of Nepali nationals are at risk. Today, there was a news that one Nepali is captured by Iranians at the Strait of Hormuz. So these are very challenging for Nepal because the government of Nepal has sent advisory to the people who are living in Israel, Iran, and Gulf region. There are risks of civilian casualties. Evacuation challenges will be for Nepal because getting 1.6 to 1.7 million people back to the country will not be easy, and this will lead to diplomatic strain on Nepal's limited capacity that we have. I think trade, tourism, and investment will be heavily impacted because Nepal is connected to West through Middle East or West Asia. So I think the aviation and all those disruptions in that region will impact trade, tourism, and investment. There is uncertainty on foreign direct investment from that region, trade inflows, shipping, and all those are being disrupted. So I think that will be a major challenge. Nepal will also have challenges on political and foreign policy challenges because Nepal traditionally follows non-alignment and neutrality. But at the same time, Nepal also have maintained very strong relations with Israel. Nepal is the first country in South Asia that has established diplomatic ties with Israel, and it was the only country for 30 years. No country in South Asia established its diplomatic ties with Israel. Nepal was the only one. So it has very special relation with Israel, and at the same time, Nepal believes non-alignment. So that is where Nepal will be caught into. There will be strong pressure on Nepal to maintain balanced diplomacy, at the same time protect diaspora. Now, even though Nepal would like to stand with Israel and the US, but its diaspora is in Gulf, so it's very challenging if Nepal's economic interests come from West Asia. So I think it is very challenging for Nepal to balance its political and foreign policy challenges. Uh, I think there are broader strategic takeaway from this war. I think the war shows that globalization of conflict has huge impact. You know, the conflict in any part of the world has impact around the world, and the vulnerability of remittance dependent economies is very risky for Nepal. So Nepal should look for an alternative. Nepal's over dependence on fossil fuel can put Nepal on risk. That is a kind of realization that has come to Nepal. I think Nepal need to diversify its economy so that it can protect itself from this kind of conflict. At the same time, Nepal should also reduce remittance dependency that we have very high on West Asia or other countries. I think Nepal should also invest in energy self-reliance because we have a huge potential of hydropower. So shifting our energy need from fossil fuel to hydropower would be in Nepal's interest. So I think this is one sector that Nepal can really focus on. Uh, to conclude, I'll say that the Israel-US Iran war is not a distant conflict for South Asia. It is an economic and a strategic. It has huge economic and strategic implications. For Nepal, the impact is indirect but very deeply structural because remittance, inflation, unemployment all will be there. And the crisis is also an opportunity to rethink. For example, I think the economic model where Nepal is heavily dependent on remittance, maybe Nepal should rethink on that. Second, I think maybe Nepal should also diversify its energy sector. I mean, Nepal should invest in self-reliant energy, which is hydropower. That can be an opportunity. Thank you, Vivek. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to address.
Thank you, Pramod sir, and thank you all the speakers for your valuable insights. Now I'd like to move on to the Q&A session so the participants can drop their questions. What I would like to do now is maybe we'll do two rounds of question and answer. First, I would like to address each question to you individually, and in the second rounds, whatever general questions we have received, I will float it in the floor, and then you can do it in the same series. So maybe we'll start with Mr. Asanga. So, sir, we have received a question from you. Ankita wants to ask you that Sri Lanka has now recovered from a severe economic crisis recently in 2019 to 24. Now again, the war in West Asia is creating a situation of resource scarcity and also exploiting the import-dependent nature of Sri Lanka's economy. So, what are the measures Sri Lanka should take for the long-term economic resilience beyond reducing work days or shifting for 4 working days?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think that's a very important question, what we should be doing right now as a nation. What Lucas spoke, as well as Dr. Pramod mentioned, they are all common issues even to Sri Lanka, depending on high remittances as well as the tourism income. So very common to all of us. But right now, what Sri Lanka should be doing is like working, trying to sort of create the stress or the pressure towards the government to sort of move to the local level, like try to redistribute it, because all of this is coming towards the government right now, and government is answerable. So there could be, I mean, Sri Lanka just recovered from a significant political instability of the crisis, people's uprising and all that. There are 14,000 the village level Grama Niladhari divisions, which is the local divisions in Sri Lanka. Immediately, they should mobilize in a way to provide essentials at the local level. Because rather than depending on the central government always, we should diversify it. We should pass the sort of and the contingency plan has to be drawn immediately, because the ships that we pay might not even arrive. There is no guarantee, because what's going on right now, Lucas mentioned about a Thai ship, but then we are, since we are all energy dependent as well as dependent on trade, we are trading nations, right? So there's a serious issue on having the sort of the guarantee. What's the guarantee that we have that these? So we need to find our own sort of self-sustained sort of a model at the local level. So that's very important. I think a contingency plan immediately has to be drawn on the local level, on those 14,000, the divisional secretary, the village level, so that health essentials, the immediate essentials can be provided. Because right now, like I mentioned, it is clearly an escalation trap which Iran has created very successfully by attacking the energy by creating an energy issue, right? So it's very clear. The energy crisis is hit basically the entire regions and all other countries. So this the trap that they have created would take some time. Even if things would resolve, I believe what I've heard was that it takes several months for the restarting of all these supply lines, as well as since they're targeting the energy fields and all that. So immediate measures should be looked at the local level. So that's really important.
Uh, Thank you, sir. Now I would like to move on to Professor Siri. So, Professor Siri, from a sociological perspective, do you foresee any identity politics or ideological polarization starting to happen in South Asia now that India is trying to portray its conflict more as a religious, it has some sort of a religious undertone. So, what do you see about this identity politics or ideological polarization emerging?
Um, Actually, right now, we do not see this emerging in Sri Lanka, but on the other hand, the political situation itself is not very helpful to really address the issues that have arisen out of this conflict, out of this, massive crisis. I think there we probably have to figure out, how to build, consensus across, sectarian political, camps to find, solutions to some of the very, very pressing issues that we are facing. I mean, for instance, we are, like so dependent on private transport, and we have, we have huge number of three-wheelers, basically 1.2 million three-wheels, in a small country, basically sort of, dependent entirely on imported, fuel. And then, of course, the problem is that we have also a food security issue because we are also, I mean, we have the potential to produce enough food in the country, but on the other hand, our agriculture has been adversely affected due to labor issues because the out migration of workers to the Middle East and so on. In many areas, labor has become very expensive and also not easy to find. So as a result, even agriculture sector has been affected. And I think we have certain opportunities that we have to make use of. But to make use of these opportunities, we have to find common ground and have policies that would help. And I would like to also touch on what uh, my colleagues said about decentralizing public services, and I have been advocating the establishment of multifunctional community centers, at the lowest possible level for a year, mainly because of this mobility issue, because people are really hard pressed to, even under normal circumstances, to move around, to have access to, not only employment, but also various services and so on. So these are kind of certain low hanging fruits that we have at our, and I think we should try and make use of those. So I think we have to, I think, find interim solutions. I mean, we know that it is not going to really help, if we really wait till the whole problem is resolved in the Middle East. I think we'll have to really have fallback options, and we have to work on these fallback options now. So I would say that on a priority basis, we have to really reduce the dependence on mobility for employment and also access to services, because that way I think we certainly have to I think maybe we can learn from India, like the employment guarantee scheme that introduced some years ago. At a time like this, I think we can certainly introduce such a scheme whereby we could really provide employment. I think the biggest problem would be when we have to manage this huge number of nearly million people who are now in the Middle East, and we really do not know how it is going to evolve. But on the other hand, we have to be ready. I remember when Iraq invaded Kuwait, we had to really manage and out something like 95,000 displaced people, and they had to be brought back and so on. But the integration of returning migrants, I think we have developed a policy, but we haven't implemented it at all. But I think it is time that we really take it out and get ready to really integrate the people who are returning. Otherwise, it will be a huge challenge. I think the political and social stability, I think, is the biggest problem that we might face in the months to come if we really don't take measures right now using those fallback options. Some of the fallback options that I just touched on. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. We move on to Lucas now. Lucas, you've been studying South Asia for quite a while now. So I just want to ask, like, how might the middle or small powers which are based in South Asia what role might they have in shaping outcomes in a world where these traditional power hierarchies are becoming more shaky and fluid?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's difficult to say because I think if we are looking at the countries in question, so middle powers, small countries, maybe like Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal, all of these countries themselves are currently undergoing manifest changes, and which is, of course, deeply connected to this transformation of the world system that we are witnessing. So the volatility that we have on a global level is replicated on a domestic level, and we've seen that in countries like Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Nepal. And I think so. We have to see how in the coming months and years, when the whole global system is currently recalibrating, how these countries are trying to repositioning themselves. If we're looking, for example, in Nepal, it will be very interesting to see how the government is positioning itself vis-a-vis, for example, countries like India and China. And I think it's the same is, for example, true for Bangladesh. And at the same time, the constraints for these countries, so on the one hand, the opportunities for them are getting more, simply because under the changes of the global system, we can see what might be referred to as, or has been referred to as, the rise of the West. So as part of the global South being more prominent, these countries are certainly bringing their demands more to the fore. But at the same time, we are also seeing a fragmentation of the world system. And so every country is looking to join up in smaller alliances because the teaming up with countries is getting more and more difficult to find common ground, to find support. And so it's very difficult to say. I think the countries in the short term will be much more opportunistic and see where they can find a partner. And I think there, if I may make a connection to Southeast Asia, so what we are seeing, for example, right now, is that a framework like the ASEAN, in the context of the Middle Eastern situation, is totally irrelevant when it comes to crisis management. It is an important forum for discourse. It has always been for conversation, but the ASEAN is not crisis management forum. It has never really been. You can really see that every country in the ASEAN is doing its best to secure its energy supplies, but there's no collective ASEAN response to that. And I think for South Asian countries, we will have to see how the countries align in the future. But it will be very, very difficult.
Thank you, Lucas. Now I would like to move on to Dr. Pramod. So, sir, in Nepal, the war is being felt not only in economic terms but in daily life too. And as you have already mentioned, at least one migrant worker has been killed in the Gulf, dozens have been injured, and tens of thousands have been stranded, and workers are unable to return home or travel to places on work. And according to a UN analysis, more than 1.7 million Nepali migrants work in the Gulf, accounting for over 7.5% of the overseas labor migration. And just today, there was this news of one of the Nepali workers working in a ship crew who was arrested by the Iran in the Strait of Hormuz. So, what are the steps that the policymakers of Nepal should take for the protection or safe returning of their people to their homeland?
I think Nepali policymakers should act quickly on two fronts. One is protection, and second is safe return of the migrant workers. I think Uh, since it is easy to predict that things can escalate, I think the country should work, Nepal should work with its evacuation plan and rescue plans. It should coordinate with host government and the airlines, domestic, I mean, Nepal's airlines and other in the region to uh, plan for emergency evacuation. Maybe Nepal should use embassies in that in the countries of Gulf uh, to work on crisis response, like how they can help them in terms of evacuation. Second, I think Nepal should also have a very strong diplomatic engagement. It should have very active, high-level diplomacy with countries in the region uh, and request to ensure that Nepalese workers get safe places to work in the ceasefire zones and make it easier for them. Maybe Nepal can also collaborate with United Nations and different other agencies and the region forums. Third, I think the crisis registration and communication is very important. Nepal has been working on that. I think there was a report that almost 86,000 or something, like less than 100,000 is registered. So it's very less in number. I mean, when we have something like 1.6 or 1.7 people in the region, registration of less than 100,000 is very less. I think there's a need to create a real-time database of standard Nepalese. At the same time, people who are in that region set up 24-hour hotlines and digital platforms for the migrants and the families so that they can track the movement of the families so that they can ensure that they are safe. I think Nepal should also work on financial and legal support. Maybe many of them might be in a situation where they might not be able to travel. So I think maybe Nepal should provide emergency fund for traveling, insurance claims, compensations, all those they can coordinate with the companies and try to help them. Nepal should also ensure legal aid because when they hire them, they have promised several things in terms of safety. So I think Nepal can also use all those financial and legal support. I think Nepal should also think for a long-term plan. I mean, Nepal really had to diversify. Like today, there was a news that Nepal government has given permission to go to Gulf again. I mean, permit for I mean, getting permit to work in a foreign country is allowed, and it includes Gulf countries. I think this is where Nepal government has to work. Nepal should diversify labor destinations beyond Gulf. I mean, there's no harm in sending people to other countries, but sending to this region is particularly very unsafe. So I think Nepal should diversify. Nepal should strengthen labor agreement to ensure safety of people in other countries as well. So I think these are very important. Maybe we can also work on how we can get those people back to Nepal and reintegrate into Nepalese domestic industry. How we can provide them jobs. Maybe that is also very important. That will also minimize the risk of getting in this kind of situation in future. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So I think we are almost at the end of our webinar. If we stretch it out, we just have about 10 minutes. So I will just ask some general questions that are in the chat box to all the panelists, and maybe you can go turn by turn to address it, and we can conclude the webinar for now. So one question from the Philippines we have is, could prolonged conflicts in the Middle East accelerate a global shift towards electric vehicles and alternative energy? And what coordinated strategies could the international community adopt to prevent widespread shortages and soaring cost of essentials like fuel, electricity, and food? And next we have General Chamila, the commandant of the National Defense College of Sri Lanka. He asks, how can South Asia collectively face this war? Because regional organizations like SARC is currently not functioning, and other platforms are also not conducting any high-level discussions in South Asia to strengthen cooperative security frameworks to mitigate indirect consequence of this West Asian instability. Lucas has just explained on the role of ASEAN in this war, so maybe you can elaborate on that as well, and maybe you can address on this one final question in the chat box for you. One of the participant has asked, President Trump has asked the other countries to deploy their military near the Strait of Hormuz to stop Iran from blocking the transportation of ships and causing disruption in global supply chain. So, what are the Europe or West stands on this request by President Trump? So maybe we'll start with Asanga sir, and then move on in the same sequence.
Thank you. Thank you, Thapa. I'll take Kamadan's question. That's a very important question. Multilateralism, where SARC is missing right now. I mean, it's not functioning. So South Asia does not have a platform for multilateral dialogue. And it's very important at a time like this. I think the recent ship attack gave sort of a clear indication why we need a multilateral sort of dialogue as well as multilateral mechanism in South Asia. Now, when it comes to the ship attack, it happened in the Indian waters, in the Indian Ocean, as well as in Sri Lankan waters in the EEZ. But as India being the net security provider, looking at the larger the region. So you can see that it was an unarmed ship, and it came on invitation from India. So this incident is a clear sort of a indication that nations require Sri Lanka, India, as well as the other South Asian nations to have sort of one platform to discuss the emerging regional security trends. And when it comes to regional security architecture, we are, I mean, far behind of designing as well as working on as one group in South Asia. One of the, what Ambassador earlier highlighted, that India has been proactive most of the time, which I argue in my book, which is not the case. India has been very reactive in some of the time, but then right now I see they have been proactive. I think so. It's important that these countries work together, not the minilaterals. I mean, minilaterals are important too, like between Sri Lanka, Maldives, India, but then you need the multilateral mechanism. So it's a good time that we sort of ask for this, as well as our foreign ministries could advocate for a platform that is missing in the region.
Thank you, sir. We would like to move on to Professor Siri next.
Well, I think you see, regional cooperation, regional, kind of initiatives can be quite important for us to address, some of the issues that are, very common, across the region. So I think, learning from each other as to how we address this issue, that issue, and so on and so forth, is basically knowledge and experience sharing can be very, very important. So that we don't have to always reinvent the wheel. So what I feel is that if we can really, have even kind of, let's say, an interim kind of arrangement whereby we could, really bring, the people together, across these countries, we should be able to really learn from, the experience, because we are dealing with a set of problems which you find in almost all these countries. So obviously we have to learn from each other, and I think the experience can be, quite important for us to, really learn, make use of in terms of addressing the issues that we face in our own countries. So I think that's what I want to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. We'll move on to Lucas.
Thank you very much. I would focus on the question on European countries' response in regards to the request by President Trump to support stopping Iran from blocking the Strait of Hormuz. The short answer is the countries have declined quite firmly. Interestingly, I think there's one exception, at least as far as I'm concerned, and that is Finland. The Finnish president, who is believed to be relatively close to the President Donald Trump, indicated earlier that week that countries should maybe consider or float the idea at least of supporting whatever mission it would be in the Strait of Hormuz. in exchange for US support in the Ukraine. And I think that is an important calculus anyway that has to be considered, why Europeans position vis-a-vis the attack on Iran's came out the way they came out from European countries. So I think that is an important calculus, and I think we have to see how that continues to unfold. But for now, they've consistently said no way we can or we were willing to support such a mission.
Thank you, Lucas. Pramod sir, we will like to conclude with your remarks.
Thank you, Vivek. I'd like to touch upon the regional organization. Actually, countries in South Asia often realize the importance of regional and multilateral cooperation only during the time of crisis. And institutions like SARC, BIMSTEC are generally created to address such challenges. But they have remained largely inactive, and due to the political tensions and lack of collective commitment and all other that we are already aware. The recent Israel-Iran-US conflict once again have highlighted that there is need to have a strong, functional regionalism in South Asia that is strong, functional, and instead of relying on ad hoc or bilateral responses during emergency, I think South Asian countries should build a coordinated framework for crisis management, which can cover areas like migration protection, disaster response, climate change, economic shocks, and all those. I think these are very important. I think only a proactive and institutionalized approach would enable the region to respond collectively and effectively on crises like this, rather than reacting only on situation only when situation escalates or only when the countries are able to resolve at their own individual level. I think this is very important. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We have come to the end of our session. I would like to thank all our speakers, Ambassador Anil Trigunayat, Asanga Abaya Gunasakera, Professor Siri Hetiz, Lucas Meyer, Dr. Pramod Jaiswal, and all the participants, and for your questions and for making this discussion even more insightful. And we sincerely hope that peace and diplomacy will prevail and this conflict is sorted out soon rather than later. So I would like to thank everyone, and I would like to conclude this webinar for today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you, Pramod. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the questions. Thanks.